Shiny, the Silicon Predator, how Broadcom weaponized acquisitions to dominate the chip market. In the high-stakes world of semiconductor manufacturing, where billion-dollar deals are as common as morning coffee and innovation cycles move at breakneck speed, one company stood out not for its technological breakthroughs, but for its ruthless acquisition strategy that would reshape entire markets. Between 2015 and 2021, Broadcom Incorporated, under the leadership of CEO Hock Tan, embarked on one of the most aggressive takeover campaigns in corporate history, spending over $200 billion to systematically eliminate competition and create what regulators would later describe as a stranglehold on critical semiconductor markets. This isn't just another story about corporate greed, it's a masterclass in how a company can use seemingly legitimate business practices to build monopolistic power while customers, competitors, and ultimately consumers pay the price. The story begins in 2015 when Hock Tan, a former private equity executive, took control of what was then Avago Technologies and immediately set his sights on transforming the company through aggressive acquisitions. Tan's background wasn't in engineering or chip design, it was in financial engineering, the kind that focuses on extracting maximum value from existing assets rather than creating new ones. His first major move was the $37 billion acquisition of Broadcom Corporation in 2016, a deal so significant that Avago actually took the Broadcom name afterward. But this was just the opening gambit in a much larger game. The newly formed Broadcom Incorporated quickly established a pattern that would become its signature: identify markets where a few key players controlled essential technologies, acquire those players, then systematically raise prices while reducing research and development spending. Within months of the Broadcom acquisition, the company cut over 1,100 jobs and slashed research budgets by hundreds of millions of dollars, a clear signal that innovation was taking a back seat to profit extraction. The true scope of Broadcom's predatory strategy became apparent with its rapid-fire series of acquisitions targeting specific market segments. In 2017, the company spent $5.5 billion to acquire Brocade Communications Systems, instantly giving them dominance in the fiber channel storage networking market. But Tan wasn't satisfied with just controlling one niche, he wanted entire ecosystems. The Brocade acquisition was followed by the $8 billion purchase of CA Technologies in 2018, moving Broadcom into enterprise software, and then the $18.9 billion acquisition of Symantec's enterprise security business in 2019. Each acquisition followed the same playbook: identify a market leader with high switching costs for customers, acquire them, then immediately implement what Broadcom euphemistically called portfolio optimization, which in practice meant cutting costs, reducing innovation, and raising prices on products that customers couldn't easily replace. Internal documents later revealed by regulatory investigations showed that Broadcom executives explicitly discussed their strategy of targeting markets where customers were sticky, meaning they had invested so heavily in specific technologies that switching to competitors would be prohibitively expensive. The most revealing aspect of Broadcom's tactics wasn't just what they acquired, but how they structured these deals to maximize market control while minimizing regulatory scrutiny. Take the CA Technologies acquisition, which gave Broadcom control over mainframe software that many Fortune 500 companies considered essential infrastructure. Within 18 months of the acquisition, Broadcom raised prices on key CA products by an average of 30 to 50%, knowing that customers who had spent decades building their IT infrastructure around these systems had no realistic alternative. But the price increases were just the beginning. Broadcom also implemented what they called focused product development, which meant discontinuing support for older versions of software and forcing customers to upgrade to more expensive licenses. Internal emails obtained during later investigations showed Broadcom executives celebrating these tactics, with one senior vice president writing that they had successfully created a captive customer base with limited negotiation leverage. Perhaps nowhere was Broadcom's predatory approach more evident than in their treatment of the semiconductor supply chain during the global chip shortage that began in 2020. As the COVID-19 pandemic created unprecedented demand for semiconductors across everything from automobiles to consumer electronics, Broadcom found itself in the enviable position of controlling critical components that entire industries needed to function. Rather than increasing production to meet demand, internal documents show that Broadcom deliberately constrained supply to maximize pricing power. The company's radio frequency chips, essential for wireless communications in smartphones and networking equipment, saw price increases of over 70% between 2020 and 2021, despite the fact that the actual cost of production remained largely unchanged. Even more troubling, Broadcom began implementing what they called bundling strategies, forcing customers who needed specific chips to purchase entire product packages, often including components they didn't need, at significantly higher total costs. The regulatory response to Broadcom's tactics began slowly but gained momentum as the scope of their market manipulation became clear. The European Commission launched its first investigation into Broadcom's practices in 2019, focusing on the company's behavior in the market for television and modem chipsets. What regulators discovered was a systematic pattern of what they termed exclusivity arrangements, designed to shut out competitors. Broadcom had been offering major customers like Apple, Samsung, and other electronics manufacturers significant discounts, but only if they agreed to purchase exclusively from Broadcom and, crucially, only if they agreed not to develop or test alternative suppliers. These arrangements effectively created artificial barriers to entry for competing chip designers, because even if competitors could develop superior or cheaper products, they couldn't access the customers needed to achieve viable scale. The European Commission's investigation revealed that Broadcom's exclusivity arrangements covered over 70% of the global market for certain types of wireless chips, giving them unprecedented control over pricing and innovation in these critical sectors. The most dramatic confrontation between Broadcom and regulators came in 2018 when the company attempted to acquire Qualcomm, the dominant player in mobile processors, for $117 billion. This deal would have created a semiconductor giant with control over virtually every aspect of wireless communications technology, from the radio frequency chips that enable cellular connections to the processors that power smartphones themselves. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, known as CFIUS, took the extraordinary step of blocking the deal before Qualcomm shareholders could even vote on it, citing national security concerns. But the CFIUS review also revealed disturbing details about Broadcom's business model that went beyond simple antitrust concerns. Investigators found that Broadcom's pattern of acquiring innovative companies and then cutting their research budgets was systematically reducing American technological competitiveness, particularly in areas critical to national defense. Internal Broadcom documents showed that the company had reduced research and development spending by over $2 billion across their portfolio of acquired companies, while simultaneously increasing prices on products sold to defense contractors and other government agencies. By 2021, the full scope of Broadcom's impact on innovation and competition in the semiconductor industry was becoming impossible to ignore. A study commissioned by the Semiconductor Industry Association found that markets dominated by Broadcom showed significantly slower rates of technological advancement compared to more competitive segments. The study revealed that in markets where Broadcom controlled over 50% market share, the rate of performance improvement in key metrics like processing speed and energy efficiency had slowed by an average of 40% compared to historical trends. This wasn't just an academic concern. It had real-world implications for everything from smartphone battery life to the development of autonomous vehicles and artificial intelligence systems that depend on cutting-edge semiconductor performance. Perhaps even more damaging, the study found evidence that Broadcom's acquisition strategy was discouraging entrepreneurship and investment in semiconductor startups because potential innovators knew that any successful company would likely be acquired by Broadcom and see its research programs gutted. The human cost of Broadcom's predatory tactics extended far beyond abstract market dynamics to real impacts on workers, customers, and entire industries. In the automotive sector, Broadcom's control over certain types of power management chips became a critical bottleneck during the chip shortage, forcing major manufacturers like Ford and General Motors to shut down production lines for weeks at a time. Internal communications later revealed that Broadcom had the capacity to increase production of these chips, but chose not to. Instead, allocating limited supply to customers willing to sign long-term exclusive contracts at significantly higher prices. The result was hundreds of thousands of automotive workers temporarily laid off, while Broadcom extracted maximum profit from artificial scarcity. Similarly, in the telecommunications industry, Broadcom's dominance in fiber optic networking equipment allowed them to delay critical infrastructure upgrades by restricting supply and support for older systems, effectively forcing telecom companies to purchase expensive new equipment on Broadcom's timeline rather than their own operational needs. The ultimate reckoning for Broadcom's anti-competitive practices began in earnest in 2021 when multiple regulatory agencies coordinated a comprehensive investigation into what the Federal Trade Commission called the most systematic abuse of market power in the technology sector since the Microsoft antitrust cases of the 1990s. The investigation revealed that Broadcom's acquisition strategy had eliminated over 40 potential competitors across various semiconductor markets, while their pricing practices had extracted an estimated $15 billion in excess profits from customers who had no realistic alternatives. In December 2021, the FTC reached a settlement with Broadcom that required the company to abandon exclusive dealing arrangements, provide competitors with access to essential technologies, and submit to ongoing monitoring of their acquisition activities. While Broadcom agreed to the settlement without admitting wrongdoing, the company was also required to pay over $1 billion in penalties and restitution to affected customers. More significantly, the settlement established new precedents for how regulators evaluate acquisitions in high-tech industries, particularly focusing on whether deals are designed to eliminate potential competition rather than create genuine efficiencies. The Broadcom case became a cautionary tale about how financial engineering and predatory acquisition strategies can undermine innovation and competition in critical technology sectors, proving that sometimes the most dangerous threats to free markets come not from obvious monopolists, but from companies that weaponize the very tools of capitalism to destroy the competition that makes capitalism work.